Hasmik, we can start exactly at 7:05 if that's okay with you. We'll just wait for a couple of more people to join.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Hasmik, I believe we can start.
Okay, perfect. Let me just. Okay. Hi, everyone. So, my name is Hasmik Chilingaryan. I study biomedical science at University of Birmingham's Dubai campus. And actually, I'm also the founding president of our Biomedical Science Society at my university. Welcome to STEM Quest 2.0 session 4 with me. And we're going to be looking at I'm not going to tell you a lot about myself. I'm not here just as a student. I'm here to ask you a very cool, very real question. Can biomedical science, not rockets or rovers, help take us to Mars? We always talk about astronauts and engineers when it comes to space travel, but what if I told you that the biggest challenges in space are actually biological and not at all mechanical? So, welcome to outer space. Let's talk about what space really does to the human body. It's not like in the movies where people float around, grow plants, and play with touchscreens like Interstellar and any other space sci-fi movie. In reality, space is actually very brutal. There's no gravity, there's constant radiation and extreme levels of that. There's nothing keeping your body working the way it should. And that means a lot of things start going very wrong and very fast. Your body start to dissolve, your bones start to dissolve actually. Your muscles shrink, losing bone and muscle density weakens the body. your DNA gets damaged, your immune system weakens, and your cells, which are the basic building blocks of life, begin to age faster than they ever would on Earth. So let's take a pause already. I'll ask you, what do you think is the scariest effect of space on the human body? You can write it down in the chat. I'll see it on my phone, actually. Whether you think it's bone loss, DNA damage, premature aging, immunity collapse. What do you guys think? I want to get your input in this. Possible. I'll give you like 1 minute to text in the chat. DNA damage, yep, that's very valid, because when there's DNA damage, you can imagine how much chaos your cells go through, the amount of stress that your cells go through as well. None of the processes can happen properly. DNA decay, because it makes up our body, that's very accurate. Again, cells cannot live without DNA, you know that. Yep, DNA damage from radiation. Radiation actually is the biggest factor, even on Earth, that causes DNA damage and cell death. So that plays a big role in cellular senescence, which will come in later too. And it causes aging, so faster aging and skin diseases and such. Believe you end up having a huge lifetime risk of cancer. Yes, radiation and space, the stress from like space environment causes cancers as well. It can cause so many diseases, especially when you look at immunity as well, and bone diseases like osteoporosis, the weakness of bones and muscle loss. So there's a lot of strain and damage to the brain as well. There's so much pressure in the body in general on different organs that it can cause damage on your bodily systems. They start malfunctioning, as everyone is saying, that you all have cellular confusion. You all have very correct answers. Let me see. Okay. So then most people think that space problems are for engineers to solve. And yes, engineers build the rockets so that, astronauts stay safe in them. They don't end up burning when they're close to like stars and certain, like the sun and certain stars and astronomical structures. But once the astronauts are out there in space, who keeps them alive? So that's where we come in, biomedical scientists or life scientists as well. According to, for example, NASA's Human Research Program, which emphasizes that space radiation causes DNA breaks, increases the risk of cancer, and damages the heart and brain, as you guys mentioned. It's not just a matter of surviving the launch, it's actually surviving the months or the years that they spend in orbit doing the research or living and testing out whether, for example, Mars is a habitable area. So when somebody's body starts falling apart in space, it's not a mechanical problem anymore, that's a cellular one. And so we start studying it as biomedical scientists. So I just want to clarify, let's clear some things up. Biomedical science isn't just working in hospitals. Obviously, as biomedical scientists, we can do that in the laboratories, in the research facilities, in the clinics of hospitals, such as like testing urine samples, testing blood samples, taking tissue biopsies. Like, shout out to those people. However, that's not the boundary and that's not the limit of a biomedical scientist. Biomedical sciences is truly about understanding how life works at its deepest level, at its deepest cellular level, and sometimes about even rewriting the rules and coming up with innovational techniques and new treatments. So we treat biology as our canvas that we start building upon. DNA is the script that we read. Cells are our code that we decode and try to understand further on. And then diseases, well, I hope you know, we study it, fight it, and increasingly nowadays, we try to fix it, hopefully coming up with innovational treatments and stuff that works out for people, like personalized medicine. So we're the ones asking, as biomedical scientists, what if cells didn't have to age? Or what if we could reprogram our immune system to fight space radiation? we are the ones asking the what ifs and how comes and how to fix these issues. So let me walk you through what actually happens to the human body over time in space. So day one, you're traveling to space, gravity disappears, your fluids start to shift upwards because obviously we know gravity pulls everything down, it keeps our body systems intact, everything is working fine, but once gravity disappears, everything is all over the place. Basically, your fluids start shifting upwards, which is why astronauts' faces look puffier and have rounder faces. And then by week one, bone reabsorption happens. As you can see in the picture, you can see initially the thicker bone structure, whereas later on by week one, it's a comparison. So the more denser aspect is obviously the natural state of a bone. However, later on, with exposure to space, you lose that bone density. Your bones start breaking down because they're not being used like they are on Earth, as most of the time you're just floating around in anti-gravity situations. You're not walking, you're not sitting, you're not exercising as much, which then leads on to by month one, because of the lack of movement, there's muscle loss and muscle atrophy. So the decay of muscles, because you're not resisting gravity anymore, your muscles shrink faster. And then after a year, you essentially experience cellular aging so fast that your cells think you're decades older. So the cells just assume that because of all the stress and the cellular damage that is happening internally and the lack of function of your body, the cells just assume that you're aging. So this is not science fiction. It's actually what happens to real astronauts and what they go through. And our job as biomedical scientists is to figure out how to protect them, essentially. So a little bit about my research. My own research focuses on how DNA damage leads to something called cellular senescence that I mentioned earlier. This is when cells stop dividing and they start to age or malfunction. So they don't perform their usual functions. As we know, cells specialize into different sorts of tissues or organ structures, or even just like red blood cells that carry oxygen around our body. In space, radiation speeds up this process dramatically. So that's why in the initial stages of my research, I'm working on ways to repair DNA more efficiently to keep cells healthy longer, even under the stress like microgravity or radiation. And there's so many different types of radiations like gamma rays, UV rays, as we know from the sun, and so many more radiations. This could lead to anti-aging therapies, not only for astronauts actually, but also for people here on Earth, especially those with diseases that cause premature aging. Like I'm pretty sure you've seen a couple of maybe images or cases of patients, young patients, children that have premature aging. They look older than they should at that age. Yeah, so 1 second. Okay. So let's get really creative for 1 minute. If you go into biomedical sciences, you won't just work in a lab. I mean, you're not restricted to that. You might change the future of space travel as well, just like how I'm trying to. You could essentially develop radiation-proof stem cells. The stem cells are the largest focus right now in the biomedical science field. I recently actually attended a stem cell conference as well myself. Really interesting, so many new developments, and there's so much more that is being asked as biomedical scientists in the field. So you could develop radiation-proof stem cells that regenerate astronaut tissues after exposure to radiation or such stressors. You could grow functioning organs in space where gravity doesn't squash the tissue structures, as you guys said, like brain damage. You could have heart damage as well. Any organ functions could be restricted. We could design anti-aging drugs for long-term Mars missions to stop cellular aging as well from happening. We could boost astronaut immunity using gene editing or synthetic biology as well, where we use different drugs or different human-made cells or antibodies and biotics that can be administered into astronauts so that their immunity is boosted even more. Or even as a biomedical scientist, we could monitor the Mars settlers from a lab on Earth, right here in Dubai or elsewhere in different countries all over, using bioinformatics and biosensors as well that are designed to track human health on a different planet. So then we could try to control that in a sense. So this isn't a dream. This is all real work being done right now. Actually, one of the picture that you guys just saw of the two twins that you've been seeing throughout the slides, I'm not sure if you are aware, but there's a NASA twin study that NASA has been conducting initially a couple of years ago, actually, I think a few years ago now. They conducted research on twins. One of them was they sent out as an astronaut out into space, and they kept another one of the twins on Earth to test out the difference of the exposure of space and the exposure of the different stressors on that twin in comparison to the twin that stayed and remained back on land on Earth. And they saw drastic differences, as you can see on the pictures. There's one of them aged significantly, and you can physically see it in his posture and his skin color, facial hair, and so many other stuff that they discovered. And they're still doing this research on these twins and for other people as well, other astronauts, to discover truly what happens in the human body. Okay, moving on from the slide. We've been here for a while. So, okay, I did say I wasn't going to go into who I am and what, but I had a little slide just to give you a little more background about me. Let me tell you on how I got here. So I graduated from Qatar International School in 2023, where I studied biology, chemistry, physics, further pure math. So you get it, all the hard stuff, all the STEM subjects, and a couple of other subjects as well on the sides. I applied to 11 universities worldwide and was accepted into 7 of the top 100 globally in the UK, Europe, and the Gulf as well. Initially, I was just like all of you. I was a high school student who clearly did not know what I wanted to do, because who's crazy enough to study A-levels in biology, chemistry, physics, and further pure math and mathematics in general, to the point that it seemed like I didn't know what I wanted. It seems like I want medicine, but I would go around saying I don't want medicine, I don't want to become a doctor. I was really interested in research from high school, so I would do a lot of readings, a lot of literature review readings. I'd write a lot of papers as well during my high school years. And I realized I was really interested in life in essence, not specifically biology or chemistry, but a combination of all of the STEM subjects. And I knew I wanted to go into a biomedical field, more of like biochemistry, biotech, something that would allow me to create or discover. So I ended up choosing to study biomedical sciences because that really encompasses all the fields that I was exploring at the time in school, and also at the University of Birmingham, Dubai, because it's right now ranked at 80th worldwide, and it's a top university for research. And since then, honestly, I founded my own biomedical science society on campus, which really helps out all the biomedical science students on campus and also in the mother campus in the UK. We do a lot of conferences, we attend a lot of conferences, a lot of research as well, a lot of fun activities. And it's just a society that brings all the biomedical science students or people interested in biomedical sciences all together to do their own research in a sense, or talk about these topics such as what we're doing today. And I also represented the university as a student ambassador. And obviously, as I mentioned before, I've begun research on DNA repair and anti-aging, which hopefully, since I'm a second year this year, I'll hopefully be continuing it next year in my third year as well. But back in high school, I was just a curious student who loved science and didn't know exactly where that would take me. If that's you, you're already on the right path by being here and attending STEM Quest, getting to know more and diving deeper into different areas of sciences. So why does this matter on Earth? Everything we learn about the human body as biomedical scientists or doctors or life sciences or researchers in general, in space has benefits here on Earth as well. So studying accelerated aging in astronauts helps us develop treatments, as we mentioned, for aging, age-related diseases, which will essentially help on Earth treating patients and looking at longevity care as well, extending life on Earth. Immune system studies in space lead to breakthroughs in cancer research, as one of you guys kindly highlighted. Radiation research helps us create better protection and therapies for patients undergoing treatments. So looking at chemotherapies and radiation therapies, looking at the different extremities of radiation's exposure in space helps us then relay that information to prevent any sorts of side effects in cancer treatment. So patients don't end up with further complications than they already have or they're undergoing. So overall, space essentially gives us a fast forward version of the human body. Using space as a tool to study and experiment on humans or experiment in different scenarios is so useful in the studies of aging, cancer, immunity, as we mentioned, bone decay, health overall. So this is a new sort of area that is freshly just being discovered, and people are starting to research, and biomedical scientists and scientists in general are starting to conduct research in space to do with health and medicine. So biomedical science helps us press a pause or even rewind on these different health crises. And yeah, I think I'm on the last slide now. Okay, all right. That's time to flip the spotlight now. I've been talking for a while. You've just been given your own lab in orbit. Let's consider this scenario. No rules, no budget limits. Be creative. What would you research as biomedical scientists or in general space scientists or STEM professionals? What would you research to help humans survive in space? You can write your answers in the chat, then we'll hear from 2 or 3 of you. I'll give you all 2 minutes to share your ideas in the chat. If you guys want to give me further detail, we could also get you to unmute and give me more detail on what you're interested in. So just not. I hope I haven't lost you guys. I did say 2 minutes, but I haven't seen anything in the chat. I'm one of those like strict people who keep in check. Is there anything? Does no one want to share their answers? Maybe. Is it possible to create an Earth-like environment with gravity while on orbit? A choose a closed place with as heavy as possible floor. That's really interesting. I think they're studying that with the whole Mars travel and everything, or looking at planets that are very similar to the environment on Earth. So far last I heard, they did discover a planet that was very similar to Earth, but it did not have high um, volumes of water. So that was something that was an issue. But gravity-wise, temperature conditions and atmosphere conditions, it was pretty similar. So that is something that is actively being researched by NASA and international space stations as well. So that's really interesting. Obviously, it's something that space scientists and environmentalists also look into, environmental scientists. Usually as a biomedical scientist, we don't look into the environment. Obviously, it's a factor that we consider on the human health. So we mainly focus on how to treat the humans or how to make humans survive for longer rather than looking at the structure of a planet or in orbit. But again, if we're on orbit as well, that's mainly for the engineers who look into designing certain space stations or spacesuits that are able to mimic or support a human life. I would research how space conditions affect the brain and neuroplasticity, since in my opinion, to correct me if I'm wrong, the brain's ability to rewire itself will definitely change in the space conditions. Yep, exactly. So there's a lot of neuronal cell damages that happen along with the whole cellular senescence. A lot of neurons might end up being silenced or losing their function. And so looking at neuroplasticity, which obviously looks at the regain or activation of neurons and the function of how they work together, would be really useful. And it is a research as well, along with the whole aging and microgravity effects on the brain and certain cells. So currently the research revolves around mainly bone structure, so bone density, muscle atrophy, and a lot of like cancer, cellular damage, DNA damage. DNA damage is the main, like I think the next step that they're working towards. So certainly I've seen a couple of articles recently as well. And there's obviously if we're looking at cell damages, then brain neuronal cells and brain activity is something that's being researched, but it's not as common. So that's really interesting, and that would hopefully in the future you can look into that as well if you're interested in neuroscience. And as a biomedical scientist, it's one of the biggest, I guess. We had 2 modules throughout 2 years that I've been studying, and it was the most emphasized module that we had. I think if given the opportunity, I would love to study more about stem cells and how we could perhaps promote more stem cells growth to counter DNA damage from radiation. This is very feasible. Don't worry about that. That's something that they're studying actively as well. So stem cells is, as I said, a big research area currently, whether that's in the UAE, in the US, in the UK, all over the world, honestly. In the conference that I went to, there was one professor that looked into, he was combining space sciences and stem cells as well, and looking at tissue regeneration actually. So triggering and using stem cells in order to specialize them specifically into certain tissue cells or organ cells and building organoids. So a 3D bioprinting essentially. So that was really cool, and it could be something that you could also go into. It looks into biomaterials, looks into 3D bioprinting, and using stem cells to ensure that we're building the right organs and tissues. And usually nowadays, when we're looking at 3D bioprinting, even if it's in space or sending those organs to space to test and everything, sometimes with the 3D bioprinted organs, they can even transplant them I mean, that's the main goal nowadays with 3D printing. They try to transplant them or using them as for for transplant patients who need an organ or need a skin transfer and such. How to stop muscle cells from dying? Yep, that's active research, as I said. And yeah, that's something that is really important. So far, I don't think they have found a cure to that. However, there are multiple NADH boosters, so supplements that are given to astronauts that boost cell efficiency, and it's mainly used to make sure that DNA repair happens, that enzymes are doing their function, so therefore that the cells in muscles and bone don't end up dying or decaying. I'd research how the space environment affects the human body and how to prevent or reverse those effects. That's very valid, and that is what we do as biomedical scientists, and that's basically our whole lecture today, session today. I would research the different environments that are around the world so I can see between different habitats and how people's ways of living are different. Yeah, so lifestyle is a big effect on aging. Obviously, we're looking into researching at space conditions. It's essentially as using space as a model is to look at the most extreme cases. So looking at the most extreme radiation cases, and then we can use that to apply it into maybe the most sunniest or most heat exposed, radiation exposed areas in the world. So such as like in Dubai or in Qatar, in the Middle East, we know that the sun is more radiant and more harsher than, for example, in the northern countries like Norway or Scandinavian countries and Russia. So that's something that we can look into, and obviously looking at the temperatures as well would make a big difference. Lifestyle, how active you are, as we said previously in the chat as well, exercise makes a big difference on how muscles work, how active you are, if you maintain or decay your muscles. Yeah, there are millions of microorganisms. Why isn't there one confirmed living one in a different planet? If there are more, okay, I had to reread that question. That was a mouthful for me. Maybe it's some that is, yeah, that's something that we would have to research. I think there is active research into microorganisms and looking into bacteria forms in different planets. So if I'm not mistaken, I've read so much about space studies and life in space in different areas of it that I can't differentiate now when or where or what article it was that I read. But I do remember there was one article that I read about the discovery of a microorganism that was very similar to, I think it was hepatitis microorganism. So if I'm not mistaken, there are those studies happening as well. That's very interesting, obviously, because you'd have to know how risky it is to the immune system, knowing that the immune system is weakened in astronauts or people going outside in different planets in outer space. You would have to consider what microorganisms are available in space and how the human body would interact with them, and what sorts of drugs or treatments you'd have to come up with. That's a very interesting area of research, and I don't think it's that developed, but obviously with active space exploration, they're starting to discover different biological organisms on different planets. So that's something you should look into and research more about. Sounds very interesting. Should I go? I'll do one more. Let me see. Whose should I do? I believe even if we are far from creating an Earth-like environment in space, I believe it's creating easily mimics Earth's gravity, we can avoid the risks that come with OEG, like bone density loss and others that many astronauts face currently. Yeah, that's very possible, and I think that's what they're trying to do with the whole Mars exploration and moving to Mars sort of theory. They try to develop a whole environment or habitat for humans to make sure that it's the optimum area that we could survive in. And as well as we do understand as biomedical scientists, there's human researchers that each human being has a different genetic makeup, so different factors can affect different people differently. There's so many difference in one sentence. But so one person may be more prone to radiation, cellular damage than another person, maybe who's from a different ethnic background or has a different genetic profile. And so that's something that needs to also be considered when designing different atmospheres in space as well. So there's so much, essentially, there's so much to consider in space science and biomedical science, combining both of them. There's so many different areas, as you guys have listed, that you can research other than what we've spoken about today as well. So there's just a lot that needs to be researched and a lot that is being done already. It's just a matter of time. And as we know, scientists are very keen on moving to space. And when that is done, we have no clue on about. It just really relies on when we're ready and when we start feeling the need to move. Okay, so let's move on. We've been here for a while. Hello, okay. My device lagged for a second. So finally, can biomedical science take us to Mars, which was our main question at the very beginning? I'd say absolutely, but only if people like you guys, curious, creative, and a little rebellious, how you guys showed me, start asking the right questions just like you did just now. You don't need a spacesuit to become like an astronaut or something to explore the universe. Sometimes all it takes is just curiosity, a microscope, and maybe a few failed experiments, but you'll end up mastering them at some point. We've all gone through that. If you're even a little interested in this kind of work, follow that feeling, follow your gut, because science doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you just to be curious and just to be interested about learning. So that's it from me. Thank you for listening to the session. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you want to know about biomedical science, space, university, essentially, careers? You can ask me anything. Quite used to answering questions from students, just like all of you. So if you have any specific questions that you'd like answering, that I'd appreciate.